The rain didn't care that her shoes had holes. It didn't care that her checking account was overdrawn by $40, or that she hadn't slept a full night in 3 years. But the man in the $250,000 Bentley parked outside her midnight shift, he was about to care a whole lot. The neon sign in the window of the Bluebird Diner had a faulty bee that flickered with a sound like frying bacon. Nora stood beneath it, watching the rain turn the asphalt of Route 9 into a slick black mirror. It was 11:15 p.m. She had been on her feet since 6 a.m., 16 hours, 2 shifts, one at the dry cleaner across town, breathing in perchloroethylene and hot steam, and now this one, smelling of burnt coffee and industrial bleach. Nora didn't measure her life in days or weeks anymore. She measured it in shifts. She measured it in the throbbing ache at the base of her spine and the sharp, hot sting of the blister on her left heel. "Hey, Space Cadet!" Nora blinked, pulling her gaze away from the hypnotic rhythm of the windshield wipers on a passing semi-truck. Brenda, the night manager, was leaning over the counter, a half-lit cigarette dangling dangerously close to a plate of cold fries. "Table 4 needs a wipe down," Brenda grunted, nodding toward a booth recently vacated by 3 rowdy teenagers who had left a tip consisting entirely of pennies and a crumpled napkin. "And the coffee machine is making that dying animal noise again." "On it," Nora said. Her voice lacked any inflection. It was a survival mechanism. If you let yourself feel the indignity of cleaning up spat-out gum and sticky soda rings for sub-minimum wage, you'd cry. And Nora couldn't afford to cry. Crying caused headaches, and headaches required ibuprofen. And a bottle of Advil was $6. $6 was exactly what she needed to buy Toby a new box of crayons for his first grade art project tomorrow. She grabbed a damp rag from the sanitizer bucket. The water was lukewarm and smelled faintly of sour milk, but she wrung it out with practiced efficiency. As she scrubbed the Formica table at booth 4, her mind ran its usual relentless calculations. Rent, due in 4 days, short by $120. Electricity, final notice sitting on the kitchen counter. Groceries, peanut butter, bread, milk. Nothing fresh. Fresh was a luxury. She swept the teenager's pennies into her apron pocket. 7 cents. Nora paused, pressing the heels of her hands into her tired eyes. She thought of Toby. Right now, he was asleep on the lumpy pull-out couch in Mrs. Gable's apartment downstairs. Mrs. Gable charged $3 an hour, a bargain, but she fed Toby cheap hot dogs and let him watch television until his eyes glazed over. Nora hated it. She hated leaving him. She hated the way he looked at her when she tied her ugly, orthopedic black work shoes every afternoon, knowing she wouldn't be back until the sun was threatening to rise. "I'm doing this for you, Bug," she whispered to the empty booth, "just for a little while longer." It was a lie she'd been telling herself for 2 years, ever since Toby's father had decided that parenting was a bit too restrictive for his lifestyle and vanished into the ether of the West Coast. Outside, the rain intensified. It didn't fall. It attacked. It lashed against the diner's plate glass windows, driven by a biting November wind. Nora carried the bus tub back behind the counter, her worn rubber soles squeaking against the greasy linoleum. She dumped the plates into the dish pit, the clatter loud in the near-empty restaurant. There was only one other customer, an older trucker in booth 1, nursing a black coffee and staring blankly at a newspaper. She grabbed a fresh pot of coffee to offer him a refill. As she stepped out from behind the counter, a pair of headlights cut through the deluge outside, sweeping across the diner's interior and blinding her for a fraction of a second. Nora paused, shielding her eyes. A car had pulled off the highway and into the pothole-riddled gravel lot. But it wasn't a Peterbilt, and it wasn't a rusted-out Honda. It was a Bentley Continental. Midnight blue, sleek, and obnoxiously expensive. It sat idling in the rain, its headlights illuminating the falling sheets of water. It looked like an alien spaceship that had taken a wrong turn and landed in purgatory. "Well," Brenda muttered, appearing beside Nora and squinting through the glass. "Someone took a wrong exit off the interstate. Think they're lost?" "Probably," Nora said, turning away. "Or they really need a terrible cup of coffee." She walked over to the trucker, poured his refill, and ignored the luxury vehicle idling in the dark. Rich people didn't belong here. They were a different species. They existed in a parallel universe of stock portfolios, heated leather seats, and problems that could be solved by writing a check. Nora had no time for them and certainly no interest. She went back to the dish pit and plunged her hands into the hot, soapy water. 5 minutes passed. The heavy glass door of the diner suddenly opened with a loud chime, letting in a gust of freezing wind and the roar of the highway. Nora didn't look up immediately. She finished scrubbing a cast-iron skillet, rinsed it, and dried her raw, red hands on her apron. Only then did she turn around to greet the newcomer. He stood dripping on the welcome mat, completely ruining a suit that cost more than Nora made in a year. He didn't look like a billionaire. He didn't have the arrogant, puff-chest posture Nora associated with men who drove cars like the one outside. He just looked defeated. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead. His tie was loosened, the collar of his crisp white shirt unbuttoned and soaked through. He was shivering slightly, water pooling around his expensive Italian leather shoes, staining the cheap floor mats of the Bluebird. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the humming fluorescent lights above the counter, as if he couldn't quite remember how he'd gotten there. "You're tracking mud, buddy," Brenda called out from the register, never one for customer service. The man blinked, shaking himself out of his stupor. He looked down at his feet, then up at Nora, who was standing behind the counter holding a coffee pot. "Yeah, sit wherever you want," Nora said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the fake, high-pitched cheer she reserved for good tippers. He didn't look like a good tipper. He looked like a guy who might walk out without paying. He nodded slowly and walked to booth 6, the one in the far back corner, away from the windows, away from the streetlights. He slid into the cracked red vinyl, wincing slightly, and stared at the empty tabletop. Nora grabbed a menu and a clean, dry rag. She walked over to his booth, dropped the menu on the table, and tossed the rag next to it. "Dry off before you catch pneumonia," she said. "What can I get you?" He looked up at her. His eyes were a pale, striking gray, but they were bloodshot and deeply shadowed. He looked exhausted. It was a specific kind of exhaustion Nora recognized, not the physical ache of standing for 16 hours, but the heavy, crushing fatigue of a mind that couldn't stop spinning. "Just coffee," he said. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone, smooth but frayed around the edges. "Black." "No food? We have pie. It was baked yesterday, but it's mostly edible." A faint, humorless smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Just the coffee, please." Nora nodded, turned on her heel, and fetched his drink. When she returned, he had used the rag to dry his face and hair. He was staring out the window at his car. She set the heavy ceramic mug down in front of him. "Rough night?" It was a rhetorical question. It was a diner waitress reflex. She didn't actually want to know. "You have no idea," he said softly, wrapping his long, elegant fingers around the hot mug as if trying to siphon its warmth. Nora snorted, a harsh sound in the quiet diner. She gestured to her stained apron, her taped-up shoes, and the grim surroundings. "Buddy, look around. I have some idea." He looked at her then. Really looked at her. His gaze tracked from the dark circles under her eyes, to the fraying fabric of her collar, down to the red chapped skin of her knuckles. He didn't look at her with pity, which he would have hated. He looked at her with a quiet, intense curiosity. "I suppose you do," he murmured. "I'm Everett." "Nora," she replied, strictly out of habit. "Drink your coffee, Everett. It gets worse when it's cold." She walked away, leaving him to his brooding. She had side work to do. Ketchup bottles needed marrying. Sugar dispensers needed wiping. For the next hour, she moved around the diner in a practiced blur, ignoring the man in the corner booth. But she felt him watching her. Every time she wiped down a table, every time she hoisted a heavy tray of clean glasses, she could feel those gray eyes tracking her movements. It wasn't creepy. It was just observant. At 1 a.m., the trucker left, leaving exact change and not a penny more. Nora locked the front door behind him, company policy after 1 a.m., leaving Everett as the sole customer. She walked over to his booth with a coffee pot. He hadn't touched his mug. It was stone cold. "Do you want a fresh one, or are you just using that as a hand warmer?" she asked. Everett looked up. "Why are you still here?" Nora frowned, pouring the hot coffee into his mug anyway. "Because my shift ends at 3. "No," he said, shifting in the booth. "I mean, why are you working in a place like this, at an hour like this?" "Because my landlord has this weird quirk where he expects to be paid every 30 days, Nora said dryly. "And my kid has this annoying habit of needing to eat." A single mother. Bingo. Look, if you're writing a sociology paper, I charge an interview fee. Everett didn't laugh. He reached into his suit jacket. For a second, Nora thought he was going to pull out a wallet and throw a $100 bill on the table in a grand, condescending gesture. If he did, she decided she would tell him to shove it. She was poor, not a charity case. Instead, he pulled out a gold money clip, slid a $20 bill from it, and laid it on the table. "I'm not writing a paper," Everett said, his voice quiet. "I run a company, a very large one. For the last 48 hours, I've been sitting in a glass boardroom, listening to people argue about millions of dollars as if it's a matter of life and death." He paused, looking out at the rain. "I had to get out. I just started driving." "And you ended up at the Bluebird," Nora said. "Congratulations. You hit rock bottom." "I don't think so," Everett said, looking back at her. "I've been watching you for an hour, Nora. You haven't stopped moving. You're exhausted. I can see it in your shoulders. But you don't stop. You don't complain. You just do the work." Nora crossed her arms, suddenly defensive. "It's a job. I need the money. There's no nobility in it, Everett. It's just survival." "Survival is the only thing that matters," he said softly. He stood up, towering over her. Even soaked and tired, he had a commanding presence. He buttoned his suit jacket, leaving the 20 on the table. The coffee was $3. "Keep the change," he said. "I don't need a handout," Nora shot back, her pride flaring hot and fast. "It's not a handout," Everett said, looking her dead in the eye. "It's compensation for letting me sit here and remember what actual work looks like." He walked to the door. Nora stood frozen, watching him. He unlocked the deadbolt, pushed the heavy glass door open, and stepped back out into the freezing rain. She watched through the window as he climbed into the Bentley. The headlights flared, the engine rumbled, and he pulled out of the gravel lot, disappearing into the dark, wet night. Nora walked over to booth 6. She picked up the $20 bill. It was crisp and dry. She stared at it for a long time, the cynical, hardened part of her waiting for the punchline. Rich men didn't just drop into diners, leave a 20, and drive away into the night without wanting something. But he was gone. She pocketed the bill. It covered the crayons for Toby, plus some groceries. She felt a brief, tiny flare of relief, quickly smothered by the reality of her aching feet. Just a weird rich guy, she told herself. You'll never see him again. She grabbed the dirty mug and headed back to the dish pit. The next night it rained again, and at 11:30 p.m., the midnight blue Bentley pulled into the gravel lot. He came back on Thursday, then again on Sunday. By the second week, Everett's midnight blue Bentley was a fixture in the potholed lot of the Bluebird Diner. He always arrived past 11. He always sat in booth 6. He always ordered his coffee black, and he never left a tip smaller than a 20. Nora didn't thank him for the money. She scooped it up with a brusque nod, entirely unwilling to play the grateful peasant. Everett didn't seem to want gratitude anyway. He just wanted a quiet corner where the demands of his corporate empire couldn't reach him. They didn't talk much at first. It was a silent transaction of space and caffeine. But slowly, the quiet stretched into sparse, jagged conversations over the rim of a ceramic mug. "You look like you fought a lawnmower," Nora remarked one Tuesday, sliding his coffee across the Formica table. Everett rubbed his temples. His suit jacket was draped over the vinyl seat, his tie discarded somewhere in his car. "Hostile takeover," he muttered. "Board members who think raising profit margins by 0.2% is worth gutting a pension fund. I spent 9 hours arguing with men who haven't spoken to a working-class human being since the 90s. Nora pulled a dirty rag from her apron and wiped down the adjacent table. "Must be exhausting. Fighting over money you'll never live long enough to spend." He looked at her, his pale gray eyes catching the harsh fluorescent light. "And what are you fighting for, Nora?" Shoes," she said, without missing a beat. "Toby needs winter boots. The snow is coming in 3 weeks, and his current pair has a hole in the left toe. That's my hostile takeover. Finding an extra $40 in a budget that's already running on fumes. Everett didn't offer to buy the boots. That was the one thing she actually liked about him. After that first night, he never tried to fix her life with his wallet. He seemed to understand that throwing cash at her would just be another way of stripping her of her agency. He listened. He watched. He treated her like an equal on a different battlefield. By week 3, Nora caught herself looking out the rain-streaked window around 11:15 p.m., searching the darkness for the sweep of his headlights. She hated herself for it. It was a dangerous habit, relying on a ghost who drove a $250,000 car. The breaking point arrived on a Friday. It was 1:45 a.m. The diner was bracing for the post-bar rush. The air was thick with the smell of old grease and floor cleaner. Nora was in the back, hauling a 20-pound bag of onions out of the walk-in fridge when the wall phone rang. Brenda snatched it up. "Bluebird, yeah, hang on." She held the receiver out. "It's your neighbor, the old lady. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through Nora's chest. Mrs. Gable never called the diner unless it was an emergency. Nora dropped the onions and grabbed the plastic receiver. "Mrs. Gable?" "Nora, honey, I'm sorry to bother you." The older woman's voice crackled, laced with panic. "It's Toby. He woke up screaming. He's burning up, Nora. I took his temperature, and it's 104 degrees. He won't stop crying. And he threw up water." Nora's breath caught in her throat. The diner faded into a dull, echoing hum. 104 degrees. That wasn't a standard childhood cold. That was a hospital number. "Did you give him Tylenol?" "He can't keep it down. You need to come home." "I'm coming. Put a cool washcloth on his neck. I'm leaving right now." Nora slammed the phone onto the receiver. She tore off her stained apron, her hands shaking violently. "Whoa, where do you think you're going?" Brenda stepped into her path, crossing her arms. "The bar's just let out. We're about to get hammered in here. My kid is sick, really sick. I have to go." "Nora, you know the policy," Brenda said, her voice tightening with stress. "You walk out on a Friday rush. I can't put you on the schedule next week. The owner will fire you. I need you on the floor." "Brenda, my son has a 104-degree fever," Nora shouted, the desperation cracking her usually ironclad composure. "I don't care about the schedule. Move." She pushed past the manager, bursting through the swinging kitchen doors into the main dining area. Her mind was a frantic blur of calculations. It was pouring rain outside. The buses stopped running at midnight. She didn't have a car. A cab would cost $25 she didn't have, and it would take 20 minutes to arrive. She would have to run. 3 miles in the freezing rain. She grabbed her thin frayed coat from the hook by the register. Her vision was blurring with hot, terrified tears. "Nora!" The voice was low, cutting through the ambient noise of the diner like a heavy blade. Everett was standing by the door. He had already dropped a $50 bill on the counter. He had his keys in his hand. He took one look at her pale, panicked face and didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't ask if she needed a minute to breathe. "My car's by the door," he said. "Let's go." The interior of the Bentley smelled like cold leather and absolute silence. It was a fortress, completely insulated from the violent storm thrashing against the windows. Nora sat rigidly in the passenger seat, rain dripping from her frayed coat onto the pristine upholstery. She didn't care about ruining his car. She was vibrating with a primal panic, her damp hands clamped tight over her knees. Everett drove with ruthless efficiency. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't tell her it was going to be okay. He just kept his eyes on the slick road, taking corners tight and pushing the massive engine to eat up the miles. "Left at the next light," Nora commanded, her voice thin. The brick complex at the end of the dead-end street. The car glided into the parking lot of her apartment building. It was a bleak, decaying structure, its gutters overflowing and spilling sheets of muddy water onto the cracked pavement. Before Everett had even put the car in park, Nora was out the door. She sprinted through the rain, threw open the heavy glass lobby door, and took the stairs 2 at a time. The elevator had been dead for 6 months. She reached the 4th floor, her lungs burning, and pounded on apartment 4B. Mrs. Gable opened the door, looking frail and terrified, in a floral nightgown. Nora pushed past her and fell to her knees beside the worn, lumpy sofa. Toby was curled into a tight ball. His small face was flushed a deep, unnatural crimson. His hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He was shivering violently, whimpering a small, broken sound that felt like a serrated knife twisting in Nora's chest. "Hey, Bug," Nora whispered, pressing her cool hand against his burning cheek. The heat radiating off him was terrifying. "Mama's here." Footsteps sounded heavily behind her. Everett stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. He looked entirely out of place in the cramped, shabby apartment with its peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of boiled cabbage. He pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket. He walked out into the hallway, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative murmur. Nora gathered Toby into her arms, wrapping him in a thin blanket. "We have to go to the emergency room," she told Mrs. Gable. "I'll carry him." "You aren't going to the emergency room," Everett said, stepping back into the living room. "The wait time at County General on a Friday is 6 hours. He'll sit in a waiting room full of the flu while he gets worse." "I don't have a choice," Nora snapped, her fear converting instantly to rage. "I don't have a concierge doctor, Everett. I don't have health insurance." "I know," Everett said evenly. "That's why I called Dr. Harrison. He's my chief medical officer. He lives 10 minutes from here, and he's on his way with a fully stocked bag." Nora froze. Her pride, the fierce and jagged thing that had kept her alive for 2 years, flared up. "I can't pay for that. Nobody's asking you to. Sit down. Keep a cool cloth on his head. Let me handle the logistics." For the first time in her life, Nora surrendered. She lacked the oxygen to fight him. She sat on the floor, rocking her burning child, while a billionaire stood guard in her decaying living room. Dr. Harrison arrived exactly 9 minutes later. He was a sharp, gray-haired man who didn't blink at the surroundings. He checked Toby's vitals, administered a fast-acting antibiotic injection for a severe bacterial infection, and left a course of pills. Within 30 minutes, the agonizing shivering subsided. Toby's breathing leveled out. He opened his heavy eyes. "You came back early." "I always come back, Bug," she whispered. Dr. Harrison slipped out the door with a quiet nod to Everett. Mrs. Gable retreated to her bedroom. Nora stood up. Her legs felt like lead. She walked into the tiny kitchen, gripping the edge of the faux granite counter to keep from collapsing. Everett followed, leaning against the humming refrigerator. "Thank you," Nora said. The words tasted like ash. "I'll pay you back. $10 a week." "You don't owe me a dime." "I lost my job tonight," she said, stating the fact with a hollow detachment. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold reality. "I walked out on a Friday rush. I'm fired." Everett didn't offer sympathy. He crossed his arms. "Good." Nora whipped her head around. "Excuse me?" "You're wasting your life in that diner," Everett said, his tone purely analytical. "I've watched you for a month. You manage chaos perfectly. You anticipate problems before they happen. You have an ironclad work ethic, and you don't crack under pressure." He stepped closer. "I don't need waitresses, but I desperately need a logistics coordinator for my Northeast distribution hub. The guy currently doing it panics when a truck blows a tire. I need someone who understands survival." Nora stared at him, her pulse racing. "I don't have a degree. I don't know corporate logistics." "You know how to stretch $40 to keep 2 human beings alive," Everett countered. "The technical skills take a week to learn. The grit, I can't teach that." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a minimalist business card, and set it on the counter. $80,000 a year to start. Full health benefits. It's not charity, Nora. I'm hiring an asset. He turned toward the door. Downtown office. Monday at 8 a.m. Don't be late." The door clicked shut. Nora stood in the quiet kitchen, listening to her son's steady breathing. She reached out and picked up the heavy cardstock. Outside, the rain finally began to slow. The rain finally stopped, leaving behind a clear road and a new beginning. Nora didn't need a savior in a bespoke suit. She just needed a chance to prove her own strength. Everett didn't find a charity case. He found the most resilient partner he could ever ask for. What did you think of Nora's journey? Hit that like button if you believe in hard work. Share this story to inspire someone today. And subscribe for more real-life dramas.